All right, I'm going to open the meeting for the Board of Health dated August 26th, 2013. I'm going to take a motion to accept the agenda.
Second motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so I am going to be acting as chairman tonight because Russell is not here, and we don't really have much on the agenda, but we'll try to get to whatever we can. On the minutes that we're going to approve, I just assume wait until Russell's here so we can approve them.
Yeah, because
okay.
if it was 1-0 implies no quorum,
Yep.
and
That's fine. And
Stephen wasn't here for most of it, so he can't vote
Yep,
on
no,
it, so
that works. Okay, so
we're back to square one again.
So there's really nothing until 7:10, so we'll just wait. We'll just wait a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Any old business then?
I don't know if you saw my email. I've granted a waiver to the schools for spraying for mosquitoes because we have nearby positives, not in our town, but in Hingham is probably the closest town, Rockland, Hanover, for West Nile and Tripoli.
I actually just saw somebody in Plymouth County contracted it.
Yes,
Okay.
there's someone passed away last week, I believe, in Weymouth, and there's a case now in Plymouth that someone's been hospitalized.
Is that Plymouth or Plymouth County?
Plymouth County, they didn't say where it was contracted or...
Yeah, well, they sort of limit it to counties, so.
And they don't release more specifics because they just don't want to panic, or I mean, why don't they say what town?
Well, they
Oh,
have...
they do say what town. If you go on the arborvirus site, you can see what towns have been tested and been positive for Tripoli or West Nile. They will not tell you exactly in town where it is, but they'll tell you which towns have tested positive. I mean, basically, because we've been positive for West Nile before, we should consider ourselves positive now.
Mm-hmm.
And we should take the precautions with the conventions of, avoiding dusk at dawn, long sleeves, long pants, wearing the bug stuff, getting rid of stagnant water, being vigilant, because unfortunately the West Nile is more flu-like symptoms, but the Tripoli can do a lot of damage. And the elderly, the immune-compromised, and children are most susceptible. So that's what we have to, be cognizant of and take the proper prevention measures.
Okay.
So
They try to discern where it's from, too, because the person may not have been in their hometown where they contracted it, so they don't want to create hysteria
Sure.
for what they contracted.
Well, I mean, the South Shore of Massachusetts, unfortunately, is prime territory and has been for several years for both these diseases. In Tripoli, it goes back to the early 1900s. We actually had some positive cases out in the Glades. So, we can't say it hasn't happened here because it has. So, if it happened once, it can happen again. We have better tools now to deal with it, and we have to take advantage of those we have to pay attention to. So that's where we're at. We have one more week of beach testing, which will be tomorrow. Results will not be until Wednesday. That's the standard delay that happens for the tests. And then we put the emails out as soon as we get the results. And what else is going on? I was on vacation last week. Mary's on vacation until next Wednesday.
Okay.
We're doing abandonment inspections for the sewer connections, and we've got a lot of recent sewage disposal systems being repaired, so those inspections are ongoing as well.
Have any of the restaurants come forth with any plans to you?
No, but there's been talking.
That's good.
I've been explaining what I want. Some people are under a misapprehension. I was just going to show up and say yay or nay, and I said no, that's not what we're doing. And I have a good indication that the Barker will be putting in the outside grease traps, which I think is exactly what they need and will go a long way to helping keeping our sewers clean. So we did have a sewage discharge in the harbor before I left. There was a broken pipe at the Mill Wharf, but we got that fixed pretty quick. So I'm glad to say that's over with. So I had everybody on it. I had the harbor master knew, conservation knew, the plumbing inspector knew.
Mhm.
There was no way we weren't going to get it fixed and stopped.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, we'll move on to our agenda item then. 7:10, old business discussion update, wind turbine acoustical testing. Mr. Gordon Dean, Palmer Capital, Scituate Wind, and Mark Wallace, representative Tech Environment, to update the board on progress status of the wind turbine acoustical testing.
I'll start, I guess. You asked us to come and ask Tech Environment will be here to answer questions about the testing. So I've asked Mark to present findings to date, as well as answer any questions that you folks have about the testing that's been done, testing that hasn't been done. Because there are certain requirements in the protocol that was discussed and negotiated with the community group in terms of wind direction, size, things like this, which they've been trying to achieve. As you know, June was fourth on record, so we had a lot of rain in June, and we got hit by lightning at the end of June, which was out for 3 weeks. So that's affected any ability to get out there for testing. But Mark Wallace from Tech Environmental, who can talk about the testing that they have done and answer any questions about what you might expect in the future.
Hi. So I'm Mark Wallace. I'm the project manager at Tech Environmental. As Gordon alluded, we had a protocol that was accepted back in late April from the board and DEP. So essentially May 1st was sort of the time frame to start doing the sampling. During that time frame, as Gordon alluded to, it was a very wet June, as well as late May was also a very wet period of time. What we've been focusing on is trying to get the proper wind speed and wind direction during the nighttime hours. Between the hours of 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. is when we're looking at for the testing. As you recall from the protocol, we are looking for a westerly wind for those neighbors that live to the east of the turbine, and then we have a couple of locations to the west of the turbine. Anyway, so the time frames that we've been looking at have not given us what kind of wind speed we're looking for. We're looking for wind speeds around 12 miles an hour or greater. The 12 to 14 is the location that we feel that gives us the maximum production of sound from the wind turbine. And that's wind speeds at 10 meters heights. These are weather forecasts that are done by the National Weather Service. We've been tracking all that. And so during this 4-month period, we've only had about 5 or 6 events that might possibly been sampled for, but unfortunately the wind direction was the wrong way or it had inclement weather. What I'd like to give to you folks is a chart of just, again, alluding to the fact that we have had, not have had the best of times as far as trying to get the sampling done. This is for a 4-month period, May through, as of today, really. And what this is showing you,
I'll take one for Russell.
what this is showing you is that this is, the first page is the month of May. And we can see the wind speeds that we're looking at, and then the recommended wind speed, with sort of the minimum there at about 12 miles an hour. Where we did exceed in the month of May we had a north wind and rain. And again, we're looking for either a westerly wind or an easterly wind. If you look at June, similarly, we had, only a couple of periods there where you might have been able to do sampling, but again, the wind was from the wrong wind direction. And then as Gordon alluded to, the turbine went down the end of June through the mid-July timeframe. So basically, this sort of gives you an understanding of, the fact that the winds have not been what we've been looking for to do the testing. And that's all sort of typical anyways for summertime periods. I mean, historically, wind speeds during the summer tend to be lower than any other parts of the times of the year. But it's not, that's not to say that we shouldn't still be looking for sampling periods when we can, because you can always get an event or two that may possibly happen. The other point of reference here is, it's been a few months.
Mark, just the general,
Sure.
Whose data is this?
That's from the National Weather Service. That is from the closest weather station that was operational was Plymouth, and then later on Marshfield Airport, which was down for a good part of May and June, has got back up and running, because that's a closer station to Scituate. But it gives a good representation as to the wind speeds for this area. So again, when we're looking at weather forecasts and wind, we're really looking, I'm reviewing the weather forecast, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, just to find out if we can get the right wind direction and wind speed. And then I give updates to Gordon, which I believe are forwarded to you folks on a regular basis. So again, this just sort of alludes to the fact that, right now during the summer period, it's been wet. It's been not as windy as we want to do the sampling. The good news is, one, we have had a sample event that we've done back on April 14th and 15th. And two, we're heading into getting out of summer, unfortunately, but, heading into the periods of time where we anticipate that wind speeds will, when it gets windier, when the storm, the general jet stream and storm track moves further south, and we can get some more prevailing westerly winds. And of course, any kind of storm event where we can get an easterly wind primarily to do the sampling. The other thing is we're looking at, again, based on the protocol and based on the guidance from the board, was low tide, high tide. The sampling we did on the 14th, 15th does cover our low tide event that we did for that period.
You said 14, 15, do you mean PM 14?
Yeah, 11 p.m. Yeah, so basically, I was going to talk about that. So we started sampling on the 14th at 11 p.m. And this was our first event. We wanted to get out there early enough. Our acoustic engineer, Ryan Callahan, met up with Gordon and a neighbor as well that was also there. So we did sampling from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. 14th and the 15th. The reason why we were doing that was the first time we got a forecast where the winds were going to be somewhere in the order of 10 to 14 miles an hour. So it looked good. The trend was good over at least several forecasts that sort of continue to say that was a good forecast. When we actually went out to do the event, it turns out that the winds had died down, but the turbine was still in operations. So basically, it was like, we had winds up at the hub height area somewhere in the order of 3.5 to 5.8 meters a second, which is relatively 8 to 13 miles an hour. So the turbine is above cut-in wind speed. It's making power and whatnot. The wind speeds at the surface were near calm. And the wind direction and wind speed that we got from Marshfield indicated that at 10 meters, we had a light wind from the west. So in some respects, I know some of the other folks were looking for that type of sampling event. It wasn't what we were necessarily looking for. Well, the guidance that I've gotten from...
I don't believe so.
Not from the community
No,
center.
sir.
Okay.
All very well documented.
Anyways, going forward, so we did the sampling. We do have some results here I'd like to hand out to you. So, stepping back a bit, so when we do the sampling, talking about the protocol, we do it in 5-minute blocks. And we do it with the turbine off for 3 consecutive 5-minute blocks, and then with the turbine on. That's all stated in our protocol. In those 5-minute periods, we're taking 1-second measurements as per the guidance. And what you can see from these results is Table 1 is a comparison of the Lmax to the L90, which is basically the DEP policy for wind turbines. The second column indicates the ambient sound level without the turbine on. Sound levels range from 31 to 49 decibels. The major, well, not the major, but the sound that we were actually picking up was mostly from background sounds were from traffic and insects. So the background sound levels were pretty typical for what you would expect on a summer night when it's relatively calm at the surface and on a warm night. The measurements on the Lmax sound levels you can see are range from 34.5 to 50.5. So the net increase ranges from 1 to 4 decibels. To put that in some perspective, a 1 decibel increase is essentially imperceptible by people, and a 3 decibel increase is barely perceptible. So the results of this analysis, it was basically the fact that the wind turbine was barely audible under these conditions at any of the locations. The second table is just another comparison. This is an L90 to L90 comparison. This sort of goes back to the old DEP way of looking at wind turbines, but it's also what's customarily done for other types of sound sources by DEP. It also gives us an idea of what the floor of the sound would be, the lowest sound levels. And so you can see here that they're just a little bit lower than the Lmax to L90 comparison. So again, it just shows the fact that the sound from the wind turbines was really barely audible during that time frame. To make that a clearer sort of presentation to you, I have some charts here that basically look at the 1 second information that we collected on at each location. So if you're looking here at figure 1A, basically the blue line indicates that's the baseline sound level without the turbine, the 49. The 59 would be the allowable increase based on the DEP policy. Each of these sort of green segments indicates a 5-minute block, and each little dot and line indicates a 1 second measurement. The procedures that we take is that our field engineer takes into account, he has his field log, he notes anything that's like an automobile or anything, other types of sound sources that are not part of this, and then indicates on here whether they're cars or other types of things. So,
what location was this?
Yeah, this is 151 Driftway. So the first one, yeah. So the first one is the comparison of the Lmax. Is the comparison of the Lmax to the L90. What we do as part of the procedures is we select the maximum 1 second interval in each of the 5-minute blocks and then average them together to come up with our 1 second value. That's the procedure that DEP has in hand. What I'd like to show you is on 1B that there's not much of a change. You'll see when if you were to flip back and forth between 1A and 1B, you'll see that there's not much change in sound. What's really being dominated here at this location at the time was a lot of insect noise going on. And there was other types of things like cars going by on the driftway, even background sound that was being heard from Route 3A, and even the hum of, I think, some operations in the wastewater treatment plant. But primarily it's the it's the insect noise. So if you were to look at this and sort of draw a line through the middle of this, so to speak, you can see that, numbers around 51 or so with the turbine on. If you look down on the next page, sort of draw a line through this again, it looks like it's about 50 or so. So this is a sort of a summation. That was for Driftway. We can go through the other ones, but a similar type of scenario goes on. The interesting thing is that further away, there was less sound or impact from crickets and other types of insects. So like at 56 Moreland Road, the sound levels are more in the mid to upper 30s. Again, we indicated when there was cars that passed by. And then you can also compare it on the next page, 2B, to the other sound. So what you're really seeing here is that the turbine is not, in this case, is not being very audible. What you're picking up is other types of background sound levels that are going on. So that's why, again, this is sort of a nice illustration to show what's behind the numbers themselves. So that's sort of a summation of the sound measurements that we took on the 14th and 15th. I think at this point, if you guys have any questions, I guess, well, let me just step back one thing before I add. Is, again, this is our first time out sampling, and again, as I iterated before, we're hopefully heading into a period where we're going to be getting, more wind, given the fact that we're getting into September, October, and those kinds of things. So
we need to have this done long before that, Mark.
Yeah, the issue is that we can sample other times. It doesn't, so I think it goes against the protocol per se. If we wanted to go out and do sampling for, other conditions,
Like southwest winds.
Yeah.
Southwest.
Guys, we're gonna,
Southwest winds.
this protocol to a meeting, you state your name, your address, we're without a secretary, and we're without a chairman tonight. So I am gonna open it to discussion, but I'm gonna limit the discussion, so our chairman can be here to respond and participate. So I will entertain some discussion, but it's gonna be limited, but it has to be through the chair if you have questions for Mr. Wallace. Okay.
One of the reasons for protocol is because the whole industry is up in question, and there's different kinds of turbines and makes and models and all that. And if everybody's doing studies, they want to use the same type of protocols, so we're comparing apples to apples. When we started this discussion almost a year ago, we never anticipated we'd be still discussing it right now with incomplete testing, but it is what it is, and this is, we all know it's not the optimum time of the year because we really wanted it in the winter, but, we're also in hurricane season, so the winds have got to get worse at some point. Our luck in that area hasn't been too great lately either, so, September 20th, there's been a lot of famous hurricanes, so it's definitely stormier then. And, conceivably, if we got the right weather conditions and wind directions, a month from now we could be done, right?
It's possible. Yeah, I don't,
None of us know for certain, but it's possible. If we want to have value of the study to compare with other within the industry, we have to maintain some kind of standard of the world. I understand, we want it done. We all do.
yeah, we all do.
Okay, I guess what I will do is people have questions for Mr. Wallace, one at a time, and once again, through the chair. I'll recognize some questions. Okay, go ahead.
David Doherty, 122 Gilson Road. I didn't get a look at the drawings, but is there a curve on there for the power output of the turbine? Because I was there that night that they did testing, and if there wasn't much wind, then I couldn't hear very much of the turbine. Later on, looking at the power dash and whatnot, I saw that the turbine wasn't putting out its maximum amount of noise. So as far as I was concerned, the tests were inconclusive, if anything. So I want the board to understand that, without the power curve showing that the wind turbines at its maximum power output, maximum power noise output, these things really don't mean much.
I'm just, I agree, there wasn't as much, like again, we were trying to capture a, max power condition. They do still have value in the sense that it looks at a different type of condition here, which we were talking about, which was sort of an inversion where you have the wind, you have the turbine operating at better than cutting wind speed, which is making power, and the fact that it was calm wind conditions, near the surface. And I know that's a condition that, that people are also interested in looking at as well. So I still think it adds value.
But his question was, there's no recognition of what power was being put out.
Yeah, the power, actually I have the numbers here. When we put that, again, when we put our report together, we'll have the power curves and everything like that. The idea was to give you some numbers.
And that's the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Okay. My other question. I'm really disconcerted with listening to you saying that the testing can be from the west wind only, because I'm the guy who made the first complaint back in June of 2012, and I've been consistently making complaints to the Board of Health every night that I'm woken up. And generally the winds are from the southwest, or the west-southwest, slightly south or west, or even sometimes in the south-southeast, and south-southwest, closer to the south. So when you're in Gilson Road, where we have a majority of our complaints, with 122, 125, 149, 147, we need a wind from the southwest. And from what I can get from this, because I've never seen the protocols, you don't plan to test from that area. So this doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, again, going back to the RFP and the protocol, it was supposed to be a west wind. Now, the west wind encompasses, a larger area of the receptor locations. If I do southwesterly, then we're skipping Moreland Street, for example. So the idea was that we were going to try to get something of a prevailing westerly wind for sampling purposes. And then on the other side, there was a receptor location plus the McKeever location that we would do an easterly wind as well under low and high tide conditions. Now, that's not to say that we can't look at something of a west-southwesterly wind or something to that effect, and do a round of testing with that during that high tide condition, because that's what I'm looking for now, is that high tide condition under a more westerly wind.
Because I just said,
Hey, Mr. Doherty, I'm going to take everybody. We're going to limit the discussion. We don't have a chairman tonight. Thank you. In the back.
Chairman Basil, my name is Jerry Kelly. I live at 56 Moreland Road, one of the testing locations. I would like to remind the Board of Health to look at your website, to take a look at the windrows, to see where the direction comes from. It doesn't come from the east. We shouldn't be testing when it comes from the east, and nobody is going to be impacted when it comes from the east. So I don't know what protocol they're using, but I have a question for Mr. Wallace here. You said that when the most appropriate sampling occurs with the wind speed, based upon wind speed and direction between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. Was the industrial wind turbine operating at all times on that night between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m.?
Yes.
Was it producing power at all times between midnight and 5 a.m.?
Yes.
But it was not producing full power at all during those hours, correct?
That's correct.
It was both.
So, Mr. Kelly, that's similar to Mr. Doherty's question. When they do all the testing, it will have the power output as part of the grid. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, Mr. Basil, I don't know why we're having this meeting if we don't have the data.
Well, we've had one testing,
But we don't have any data from
And
it.
it's a status meeting. It's an update.
But it's being presented as a successful test.
I don't consider it a successful
I don't.
test.
Right.
I'm
agree
speaking
with
for
that.
myself.
I think you're right.
I consider it one sampling, then we have a lot more to go. I absolutely do not consider it a successful test.
Mr. Bassett, Michelle Bannon, Gilson Road. I'm going to try not to cry throughout this because I am so frustrated at this point. Jennifer, how many complaints have you received from us at certain wind conditions and at certain wind directions? Please review your notes to see where we have complained. West, seriously, we are southwest. You could have come to my house tonight, stood on my porch and listened to it. You could have come last night into my bedroom and heard it all night. I'd like to present this. These are my own copies from Power Dash. I took the time to look at it. You were at 30% at most, which means you weren't even close to full operation. You were even consuming power. I'm shaking at this point that you have the audacity to come here and give incomplete results. Please.
Once again, I don't consider these complete results.
No, I
I think they're incomplete as well.
I understand that,
I
but I
get-
just want you to see
Yeah.
that what he's telling you is slightly misleading. And we have been very transparent right from the start. We have documented everything. We have sent things to Jennifer. We've done our own research. We have told you time and time again. And all of a sudden, these protocols are taking priority. They mean nothing. You are going to get nothing, and that's what they want you to get, is nothing. Thank you for your time.
Can I keep these?
No, you can keep.
Okay. When we get the report, will we have that?
You'll have actually more on a sampling period every 5 minutes for that. So that way you can tie together each sampling period. So it'll even be more than that.
So as part of this, you could have included this.
Yeah, we could have included it. Like, again, it was just to try to show you where we stood in the process.
But when we get the report, I want it to be complete.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, right, yes. I mean, the whole idea was originally we were going to do sampling and then give a report. Given the circumstances that we're at here, I just thought it made sense to at least give you some idea based on the results of our first testing.
Okay.
I have something for you too.
Go around the room, Mr. Darty. I said what I'm going to do, and we'll have a chairman that needs to participate and respond.
Mr. Bassett, as you know, Tom Thompson, 149 Gilson Road. I hope everybody's had a good summer. It's been an interesting summer on the cliff. Not even any questions, just a couple of points just for the record, and I know that you folks have already received this correspondence. The last week of May, we received an email from Tech Environmental that they were planning on a test on May the 30th and 31st, so similar to the frame late evening to early morning. Wasn't a lot of notice for us, but we had 2 or 3 days notice, and we were prepared to get somebody out there for those days. The morning of May the 30th, we received an email from Tech Environmental, certain members of the community, to advise that the test had been scrubbed. And the reason that had been scrubbed is because the winds were predicted to be coming from the southwest at approximately 7 miles per hour. And as soon as I saw that email, I said, having lived this dream since March of 2012, that wind speeds from the southwest at 7 miles per hour are optimum test conditions. And that was a brutal weekend for everybody that lived in the neighborhood. And I know Ms. Sullivan received emails from myself and Mr. Darty and a number of other folks that were living on the cliff. We can predict when those optimal test conditions are just by reviewing the weather reports, because we do this every day. When we saw the email come in for this August 14th, 15th time frame, one, it was on 24 hours notice, so we couldn't get our consultant in. And two, based on those test conditions, particularly winds coming from the northwest, we knew that those were not going to be impactful conditions for the community and would not provide a reasonable level of test and test protocol What continues to be promoted by the folks on the other side of this discussion are higher wind speeds, which raise the level of ambient, which gives you less of an accurate reading and recording of exactly what's coming off of that industrial wind turbine. We've requested information in the form of sound level measurements and SCADA data from Tech Environmental, who they were kind enough to respond today that they're going to provide those to our acoustical consultant, and I thank you for your kind response, Mr. Wallace. So this will be reviewed and analyzed very, very closely by Rick James and Acoustic Solutions as we move this along. And our community is watching this quite closely. Our consultants are watching this quite closely. These proceedings are recorded. We note that. But this, as we see it this evening, and I recognize that this is a report, not a formal submission of a report, right. So I will also acknowledge that, but we have to do better than this. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
If I may respond, if that's possible. And speaking to the May 30th to 31st event, again, it goes back to wanting to capture a higher wind speed. At the time, we thought we were going to get something in the order of a 10-mile-an-hour wind speed, something close to what we were looking for. And again, the southwesterly wind wasn't the condition that was part of the protocol, so we were looking at a more westerly wind. I then informed them that the winds had died down, and wind speeds that night were, again, in the 7-mile-an-hour range, and the power production was, well below, was below 50% for the turbine. Now, that's not to say, I'm not saying that this is not perceptible from those kinds of conditions. This is there's two things. There's perception, and then there's compliance. The compliance part of it is, a 10 dBA increase over background. I'm not saying that anybody doesn't hear these things. I'm just saying that's a perception thing. So.
Well, with respect, Mr. Wallace, we've spent an awful lot of time with our consultants on this, and those conditions that I articulated to you would have demonstrated noise beyond 10 decibels, so beyond 10 dBA. And we'll have an opportunity to test that ourselves.
Yeah, sure. Right.
We'll have an opportunity to test that ourselves.
Right.
So, again, this is all going to be documented.
Right.
There'll be a place to have this conversation down the road, but just for the record.
If everyone else is
No, I'm just going around the room. I saw your hand up.
Sean Harris, 26 Ridge Hill Road. If you're going to do this again, is there any way you can have a PowerPoint presentation that, would be nice to...
Sure. Again, I didn't know what the form of things.
All right. Okay.
And to be honest with them, the idea was to try to sort of convey what we measured, and I thought between some illustrations and some things like that.
All right. Okay. How much time do you need from you, Mike? Having a wind event to the time you come to a meeting? 2 days, 4 days, 2 weeks? If the optimal conditions are tonight and you test tonight, when could you present to them?
Well, I mean,
why are you looking at me like you have questions? That was a good question.
No, well, the reason we called this meeting, the board decided to call this meeting and have these gentlemen in because we hadn't had any testing.
I realize that.
And we
I
wanted...
realize that. But, I grew up in this town, and you are going to have conditions, the next month, like you said.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It might not be southwest, but it's going to be easterly. Almost guaranteed.
Yeah, but I think every time we do a testing, we don't want to call them in. The idea was to get the testing over with and have a big report and then look at the whole volume of the report. Because, one night compares to another night, but if we take them piecemeal, it's going to be more difficult, I think.
All right. Now, if I can just ask one more follow-up to that, it seems like there's a little disagreement on wind direction when we're going to test. Wasn't this all agreed upon ahead of time, if it was going to be easterly or southwest?
there are two prevailing wind directions, that we were given direction. One is from the west, wind from the west going to the coastline.
Mm-hmm.
And there are the four receptor locations, monitoring locations that we have, in addition to the McKeever property. And there was another location to the west, I don't remember the street address off the top of my head, but, that would then have to be monitored when the wind is coming from the east. And then we'd also do the McKee location. Well, that one would get monitoring because it's the closest one. We would do monitoring under both those conditions, and in addition to low tide and high tide. So, so that's why we've been talking about these two wind directions. So basically, that's what our protocol states. That's what's been approved here. That was what I think the consensus of the group was at the time when they put together the RFP, and that's what we've been focusing on.
The only question, I'm not sure who has on Paul Arnberg at 127 Gilson Road. We did the Wesley Paul Arnberg. I'm just curious as to how that RFP was written with Wesley winds, because I've sat through every meeting and I've never once heard anybody say Wesley without the word south in front of it. So I'm just curious how that got mixed up or whatever. And I understand that maybe a westerly might come a little bit from the south, but for me, it's always a southwest wind that I have the issues with. And the night of testing, I can tell you, on the night of that testing, I did not hear that wind turbine at all. And I can tell you, and I've written emails to Ms. Sullivan, and mine is only once in a while, because I could do them almost every night. Anytime that wind's coming my direction, I can hear it. And I just can't every day write an email to her. But, the point I'm making is that this is happening all the time. Anytime it's southwest, I can hear that. And to me, that's what we should be testing for the most part. I know that's what affects me. I know other people might have other directions. But just to hear westerly just disappoints me, because I never heard of it totally, ever before us talking about westerly by itself. That's all.
Mr. Bassett, may I help with that? Do you want to just point to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tonight?
Yep.
So just point of record again, there were 3 groups involved in this process. There was representatives from the Board of Health, representatives from the wind developer, and the community group, which was represented by Jerry Kelly and I, with advice and input that we received from our acoustical consultant, Mr. Rich James. The protocol that was presented by the community group, with the assistance of Mr. James, was the protocol that was not accepted ultimately for the SAR process. And we were insisting on that. Southwest winds, lower winds to be done with that sort of thing. So this isn't something that we'd agreed to. This was an RFP that was approved by the Board of Health as drafted by Palmer Capital. That's where the disconnect is.
Let's take care of them.
I agree that we did have 3 groups represented, and that you were part of it, drafting these things. It was discussed where the receptors were, nice work, and it was discussed with 3 directions. So this is nothing new. We have tried to follow the protocol the Board of Health set out. That protocol was also reviewed by Mass DEP, and has been changes based upon Mass DEP input. I have offered through Ms. Sullivan to the Board of Health, because I've seen reports in the paper about people complaining about the lack of tests, that if they want to pick other days, and we've contracted with Tech Environmental for 4 sampling events, if people want to throw away sampling to the west, if they want to pick other conditions, I've even suggested that they have their consultant review the met data and propose sampling, and they can get down here and we'll get our people out there. But as you saw on the evening of August 14th, 15th, when they were expecting higher wind conditions, which Mr. Thompson wrote to them and complained about those higher wind conditions. And we got there, and the wind had died down. And Mr. Daugherty said, this is optimal testing. This is the exact type of testing, the meteorological conditions that affect me, that when they didn't get the results they wanted, they're complaining about it. So, if the Board of Health, we cannot change the protocol. This was approved by the Board of Health. The Board of Health wants to suggest changes. If they want to turn it over to the community group for selecting 3 more nights for sampling, we'll work with you on that. But, we're going to be criticized whether we follow the protocol, whether we don't follow the protocol. So what we're trying to do is follow the protocol that was accepted.
And I think that should be a discussion that we have with when Russell is here. Yeah, so we're all hearing the same thing.
Yeah,
But that's a discussion we can have with them. Skelly?
Chairman Buzza, it's Jerry Kelly at 56 Moulin Road. Two comments. We have insufficient data to be able to come to any kind of conclusion whether this was a valid test or an invalid test at this point in time. So to say that the community group is rejecting it, nobody in this room except the Tech Environmental and Mr. Dean has the data to be able to come to any kind of educated conclusion. That's number one.
And I would agree with you on that. I
Number
would take
two,
yeah.
I would ask Ms. Sullivan, how many complaints have you received from any home that lives west of the wind turbine? And if you're going to be testing that easterly wind, they've got to live on the 7th fairway at Widow's Walk to be impacted by it. That's what's west of the wind turbine that would be impacted by an easterly wind. I never heard that mentioned as a test because nobody's impacted over there.
I think they use the one that's, the address that's back towards Widow's Walk.
Yes.
As a,
The McKeevers?
no, as a, more for Ladd's Way, the people that were in for complaining from Ladd's Way.
I believe that, and Ms. Stapleton lives there, I believe that's impacted by a northeast wind, more so than an east wind. Isn't it, Ms. Stapleton? So, we're going to test directions that really are not impacted.
I had submitted to the board back a year and a half ago, a drawing that have to show you all the houses that are impacted to the north, south, east, west. And I didn't see the data from the actual night, the actual winds that were recorded, but they were recorded to be out of the northwest and west-northwest that night. I said,
You're talking about this night?
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what he had there, but that would be the wind. You can see the downwind wouldn't be anywhere near the buildings. You can have that. You can see where the winds from the southwest and through here, you're picking up all the places at the top of the cliff. I'm a registered land surveyor. You don't have to be that to be able to see this. I don't know where they got that west wind. The area in yellow is what that would have been downwind that night. And it's up in Gilson Road, when I went up there that night, I couldn't even hear the wind turbine. I knew it was going to be a waste of time.
This data is going to be in the...
Excuse me, I do have one question. You're saying that night you recorded northwest or west-northwest?
Well, that's what the Weather Bureau said that night.
But
I don't know what they put on there.
According to the sampling that they had, it's a west wind of 10 to 14, which was forecasted.
We ended up with a 3 mile an hour west wind.
3 mile an hour west wind, correct.
Yeah, well, that would still put the cone down in here, down, and we were up in this Gilson Road.
Correct. So, okay.
So even if it was a west wind, we're in the wrong place, because this is Mr. Kelly's home, down here in the southwest. And the upland conditions, which I understand, is slightly to the right quadrant of the downwind area. So if it had been from that direction, which it wasn't, it came from the east, it would have been down here. So,
Yeah,
and then again, even if it was, the turbine wasn't running at full power, so.
Mr. Kelly, he seemed to, Ms. Law seemed to indicate that if we tested for a southwest wind, we missed yours
Yeah.
house.
Yes.
Yes.
So what impacts you?
West-northwest. So I would have been impacted that night. I didn't hear the wind turbine at all that night. All I heard was crickets.
Well, this is, once again, this was an update when the board had these guys, wanted these guys in. Nothing had been done, and there was a lot of concern that nothing had been done. And since that time, at least we've gotten one sampling, but there's going to be more to come with some more data. The data is going to be made available, and we'll have further discussion on it.
Just one more point, Mr. Mazza. Please review the sampling and determine whether it is valid or invalid. If this is not producing at full power, you don't have a valid sampling.
And that...
And you don't have the
we're gonna have that,
to arrive at that.
we will have the power output as part of the report.
That's correct.
Is correct?
Yes, but my point is, you cannot, if in fact it was not producing at full power, you cannot claim that this is a valid sample.
But that will be part of the report.
Hopefully.
I had a question.
Yes.
What wind speed would allow the turbine to be at max power?
The wind speed at the hub height would have to be at 9.6 meters a second, or about 22 miles an hour. That's at the hub height, so you're talking about 80 meters or 250 feet up in the air. And when we do when we're doing our forecast, looking for the wind, we have determined that when the forecasts are based on National Weather Service data, which is at a 10-meter height, and we have determined that wind speeds of around 12 to 14 miles an hour in that range would get us to approaching maximum production on the turbine. So that's what.
Maximum being what?
Well, 1,500 kilowatts is the max, but
Percentage-wise.
percentage-wise, we'd be looking somewhere in the order of probably 75 to 80 and above, because I think, to try to get the specific maximum production, if you think we're waiting now, they would be waiting even longer to try to get this. Right, exactly, at least for the time. And again, we're talking about time periods in the middle of the night. And a lot of times the wind, has a sort of a diurnal effect. When the sun's out and heating up, there's a lot more wind during the daytime. At night, it tends to subside. Unless, as we get into the colder months, you do get more storms and things like where you can get a more westerly wind or easterly wind if we're trying to do the other sampling if that seems to be possible as well. So that's what we've been looking for. And we thought, based on the forecast on the 14th and 15th, that we were going to get out our first
Has there
opportunity.
been communication with you and Mr. James?
Well, I think the communication has been through the community group. For the event on the 14th and 15th, I tried to communicate with Mr. James by phone on a few occasions on the morning of the sampling event. Again, we had seen the weather forecast change. On the 13th, the wind speeds at the beginning of the day were indicating the forecast was going to be wested at 3 to 4 miles an hour. By the end of the day, the forecast had changed, and I communicated that there was a possibility of getting at our first sampling event. I looked at the weather forecast overnight and the first thing in the morning, and that forecast was still dead on for 10 to 14 mile an hour winds, which is what we were looking for. And that's when we tried to reach out to Mr. James to do the sampling on that. So, with these kinds of wind forecasts, they tend to fluctuate. We try to give as much notice as we can on the sampling of that, and that's
Imagine about Mr. Wallace was talking about wind speed at the hub. You have to remember, he's talking about at night now when we have a stable wind condition, when the air temperature changes, so we can get an inversion. But in New England, what the problem is, we have a thing called wind shear. Whereas we have optimum conditions, maximum speed at the hub, it will give maximum noise. But down at the lower elevations at ground height, sometimes you can have 3 times less because of wind shear in New England, quite prevalent. So what happens in that case is because there's no wind at lower elevations, the ambient background level is much lower. So you get the wind speeds higher at the hub, which talking about puts out maximum power. That's the conditions that really get us. So when we talk about, gee, it's 5 miles an hour down to the ground, but yeah, but we're assuming because of the wind shear, probably 20 miles an hour up at the hub. So that's what we're looking at.
But the information they get from the Marshall Hill is 10 meters up, isn't that what you were saying?
yes.
Okay, I think that's where we're gonna,
Did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just, Mark McKee, 151 Driftway. Ms. Sullivan, I just, again, wanted to reiterate some of our documentation that we've given you in the past hasn't come as often. We have it all. My family is still getting woken up in the middle of the night with this industrial wind turbine. Just because I'm not giving you data on a weekly basis, don't think that we're not being 100% impacted by this monstrosity. And, again, hopefully we can come to a very good conclusion, eliminating the westerly wind data and going to southwest, because that's where everybody in this room is impacted. And, if whether the wind speed is at 10, 15, whatever, we are affected by this thing, and the data needs to be correct and accurate. And that's the only way that this is gonna come. And our acoustician needs to be here, because a lot of this stuff, through that data, I'm sure, you're gonna be able to find some inaccuracies, and we want the truth.
okay.
We deserve the truth.
I have a question. So we're going to continue to go with that protocol. So if an event does come up, we're going to still stick with the procedures here, or are we looking at changes to that? I'm just curious. I just think there was a little bit back and forth as to whether that was going to.
I think we have to stick with the protocol, and then we can add to that.
Okay. I just wanted to.
As a board, and with Mr. Dean's offer, we could add to that.
Mr. Bassett, just a point of clarification. So in other words, the wind that produces the noise from all the complainants in this room is not going to be tested, according to this protocol.
We're gonna go with the protocol, and we can add to it according to Mr. Dean's offer. And Mr. Kelly, we had numerous meetings and discussions regarding that protocol. Okay, last one.
I want to clear when you say add to it. When this was set up, we went out to bids. There were 4 sampling events that were asked for. We had 1 sampling event. We have suggested if you want to, the next 3 sampling events, propose something different, even if the community group, Mr. James, from Michigan when he is, to do the forecast, fly down here, do sampling, we'll get the people out here. But we're not sampling every night, for
I wouldn't expect you to
next
sample
year.
it every night, Mr. Dean, but I did take exception to your correspondence that suggested that you're only gonna do 4. Because if the board deems it necessary to test more, you can refuse, but I would suggest that wouldn't be beneficial.
We'll have that discussion when we get to that stage, hopefully we don't.
All right. So that's the update on the testing.